They said it was an accident, that my dad had slipped on the stairs, hit his head, and died instantly. No foul play, no investigation, just a tragic fall in his own home. But something about it felt wrong from the beginning. Because the man I knew, Daniel Rhodes, was careful, controlled, sharp, the kind of person who measured every step, every decision, every breath. He didn't accidentally fall, especially not the week after he told me he had something important to show me. My name is Leah Rhodes. I'm his only child, or so I thought. It all started 2 months earlier. Dad had invited me over for dinner, just the two of us. Something we hadn't done in a long time. Ever since he married Elaine, his second wife, things had changed. She was younger, colder, always watching me like I was a threat. Dad said she was just protective. I said she was manipulative. We agreed not to talk about it. That night he was quiet, pensive. We finished dinner and he poured us both tea, then looked me in the eye and said, "Leah, I've been thinking a lot about the future, about the legacy I want to leave behind." I smiled. "Well, your tomato garden's a great start." He didn't laugh, just slid a small leather folder across the table. "There's something I want you to read, but not here. Take it home. Promise me you'll read it tonight." I promised. I meant to, but I didn't. The next morning, he was dead. I remember the call like it happened 5 seconds ago. Elaine's voice trembling much but not quite breaking. "Leah, your father, he's gone. Gone. Just like that." I dropped the phone. My world tilted. The funeral was a blur of polite handshakes and empty condolences. Elaine stood front and center, a black veil over her face, squeezing crocodile tears from dry eyes. I kept staring at the casket, trying to remember if I'd said "I love you" before I left. I hadn't. Back at the house, everything felt staged, too clean, too curated. Elaine didn't want me staying the night, said it would be too painful to have me in his office. That was all the confirmation I needed. Something was off. That night, I finally opened the leather folder he gave me. Inside was a document, unsigned but dated just days earlier. A new will. My breath caught. The first line read, "I, Daniel Rhodes, being of sound mind, declare this my final will and testament. I hereby leave the entirety of my estate, property, investments, and holdings to my daughter, Leah Rhodes." It was everything. The house, the business, the land, the shares, even his vintage car collection, everything. To me. Not a single mention of Elaine. I flipped through the pages in disbelief. At the bottom was a note in his handwriting. "Bring this to my lawyer on Monday. We'll file it together. Love you always, Dad." But Monday never came, because by Sunday morning he was dead. The official will, the one filed with the courts after his death, was the old one. The one that split everything 60-40 between me and Elaine. Which meant she inherited millions, and I was left with a portion of my childhood home and a share of a business she now had controlling interest in. I brought the new will to the lawyer. He said since it wasn't signed or notarized, it wouldn't hold up in court. "It's unfortunate," he said, "but legally, it's meaningless." I didn't believe that, and I didn't believe Elaine had nothing to do with this, so I started digging. I went through every drawer in Dad's study, careful not to tip off Elaine, who had already changed the locks and graciously given me a limited 2-hour window to collect sentimental items. I found notes, reminders of meetings, lunch dates, even a handwritten checklist. At the bottom of one, it said a Monday, no final signing with Leah, will and trust. It was circled. Bold. I snapped photos of everything. Then opened his office computer, password protected. I guessed 3 times before getting locked out. I tried birthdays, pet names, even my own name. Nothing worked. But then I remembered something. He once told me, "You're my legacy, Leah. Every password I've ever made starts with your birthday." I typed in 0429 legacy, and the screen unlocked. Inside were folders, dozens of them, but one caught my eye. Final Docs, Rhodes Estate. I opened it. There it was, the new will unsigned, digitally, time-stamped, and in the same folder, a scan of the notarized copy. My hands shook. He had signed it. He had notarized it. It was real. It was legal. So why wasn't it the one submitted to probate? Only one person could answer that. Elaine. I copied the entire folder onto a flash drive, tucked it in my coat, and walked out without saying goodbye. That night I stared at the file, the timestamp, the scan of the notary's seal. And then I did something I hadn't done since I was a teenager. I went back to Dad's study. Through the garden entrance I knew Elaine never locked. I slipped in through the back, flashlight in hand. I didn't sleep that night. The signed, notarized copy of the will sat on my desk, the one that left everything to me. But in court, it had never even been mentioned. Elaine had filed the older version, and someone had helped her do it. The first thing I did the next morning was look up the notary's name from the document. Christopher Doyle. He wasn't listed in my father's usual circle. I'd never heard of him. But he had stamped the document and signed off as the official witness. So I called the number listed under his notary registration. A woman answered. "Doyle Accounting, this is Rachel." "Hi, I'm trying to reach Christopher Doyle. Is he available?" Pause. "He passed away 2 weeks ago." My heart stopped. 2 weeks ago, that would have been right after my father died. She sounded surprised. "Wait, are you Leah Rhodes?" "Yes, why?" Another pause. Then her voice softened. "Chris mentioned you. He said he notarized something big for your dad. Said he was nervous about it, like something didn't sit right." I gripped the phone. "Did he say why?" "He said a woman came by later asking questions, said she seemed off. Controlling. Wanted to know if the will could be altered or deleted." I didn't have to guess who it was. Elaine. Rachel hesitated again. "He told me if anything happened to him, I should check the top drawer of his office desk." 20 minutes later, I was in Doyle Accounting, standing across from a young woman with worried eyes and trembling fingers as she unlocked the drawer. Inside was a single flash drive and a handwritten note. "If anything happens to me, this is why." We plugged it in together. There was only one file, a video, security cam footage from Doyle's office. It showed my father sitting at the desk signing the will, then Doyle signing and stamping it, clear, unquestionable. The date was 5 days before Dad's death. Rachel covered her mouth. "I knew he looked worried. He said he felt like he was being watched ever since." I took the flash drive, thanked her, and walked out with shaking knees. I had proof, video proof, and yet my gut told me I needed more, because video wasn't enough to prove Elaine had anything to do with my father's death, only that she buried the truth. So I kept digging. I called my father's longtime assistant, Marta, who had mysteriously resigned a week after the funeral. She picked up on the third ring. "Leah?" "Marta, I need to ask you something. Did you see my father the day he died?" Long pause. Then a whisper. "Yes, and I saw her too. She told me everything. That morning, Marta had come by to drop off some paperwork. Elaine answered the door, said Daniel was upstairs resting, but something felt off. Marta heard voices, an argument, something about changing the plan, and she doesn't deserve any of this. Then a loud crash. Elaine came down the stairs alone, said Daniel was taking a nap, and Marta could leave the documents on the counter. He was found dead 2 hours later. I asked Marta why she didn't say anything. She hesitated. Because Elaine paid me, offered a severance if I left quietly. I didn't know what else to do, but I regret it every day. That was the final piece. Elaine was there. She was arguing with him. And now, she was benefiting from his accidental death while the true will sat buried in a locked cabinet. I took everything, the notarized document, the video, Marta's statement, to my father's old lawyer. He reviewed it all in silence, then leaned back and said, "This is enough to reopen the estate, enough to contest the will." I exhaled, finally. But he wasn't done. "You need to be careful, Leah. If she's willing to lie and cover this up, she may be willing to go further." He was right. Because the next day, someone broke into my apartment. Nothing was stolen, but the flash drive? Gone. Whoever it was didn't even try to hide it. My desk was rifled through. My cabinets were open. They'd come for one thing and they got it. But I had backed it up multiple times, and this time I wasn't going to play defense anymore. I was going to war. By Monday morning, the motion to reopen my father's estate was filed. We had a signed and notarized will, a witness statement from Marta, and partial security footage showing the will being finalized. The court date was set for 2 weeks later. That gave me 14 days to do what the legal system might not. Get Elaine to confess. The night after the filing, I got an email from her. Not a phone call, not a letter, a cold 3-line message. "I know what you're doing. You're wasting everyone's time. Your father wouldn't have wanted this. You've made your choice. So have I." I stared at the words. It sounded like a threat, not a bluff. I decided to go back to my father's house one more time. This time with a locksmith and a court-approved order to access his personal study. Elaine refused to be there, said it was too upsetting. I knew better. She didn't want to see what I'd find. The locksmith opened the safe behind the bookshelf. It took 30 minutes. Inside were 3 items. 1, a handwritten journal. 2, a sealed envelope addressed to me. 3, a small voice recorder, the old-fashioned kind. I opened the envelope first. Inside was a letter in Dad's handwriting. "Leah, if you're reading this, then something happened before I could finish what I started. I've suspected for a while now that Elaine has been hiding things from me. Manipulating situations. I haven't had proof, but I'm trying to document everything. If anything happens to me, don't trust her and don't let this go. Love, Dad." My hands trembled as I opened the journal. It was filled with notes, careful, detailed entries about strange behavior. Elaine intercepting mail passwords. Mysteriously changing conversations he didn't remember having, and mentions of her visiting the notary days before the signing. The last few entries were the most chilling. She started watching me more, questioning every call I make. I don't feel safe in my own home anymore. I think she knows about the new will. I think she's going to try something. If I'm gone, it wasn't an accident. My breath caught, then I pressed play on the recorder. The quality was grainy, but the voices were clear. "Elaine, why are you doing this? You think she deserves everything after what she put you through? Dad, Elaine, stop. Leah is my daughter. This isn't about punishment. It's what's fair. Elaine, you're making a mistake. Dad, the only mistake I made was trusting someone who clearly never loved me. Elaine, you don't mean that. Dad, I do. And if you try to interfere, I'll take this to court myself. Then, a loud thud, a crash, and the recording stopped. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was a verbal confrontation with a possible physical struggle at the end. I now had a digital copy of the signed will, the sealed letter, his journal, the voice recording a witness, and the missing original will. But I still didn't have a confession. So I came up with a plan. I invited Elaine to coffee. Neutral location, public, safe. She didn't respond at first, but after I sent her a single message, I found the voice recorder. She agreed. We met at a quiet cafe on a Tuesday morning. She arrived in dark glasses and a scarf like she was hiding from someone. She didn't order anything, didn't say hello, just slid into the seat and hissed, "You have no idea what you're doing." I calmly set my phone on the table, recording, but disguised behind a coffee cup. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm protecting my father's wishes. She laughed once, bitter. Wishes? Your father was losing his mind. He couldn't remember where he left his car keys half the time. He remembered enough to change his will. That wasn't legal. It was. Signed, notarized, witnessed. Then why didn't he file it? Because you stopped him. She leaned forward. You think anyone's going to believe you? You, the daughter who barely visited, who resented me from day one. I held her gaze. They'll believe his voice. She froze. What voice? I pulled out a flash drive and set it gently on the table. The one that proves he feared you, the one that caught your last fight. Her face drained of color. You don't have that. I do, along with your little bribe to Marta and the footage from Doyle's office. I've got enough to make sure you never touch a dime of my father's estate. She went quiet. Then succumbed to my shock when she smiled, cold, calculated. You think this makes you a hero? You want the truth? She leaned in. Fine. Your father was weak. I built his empire while he doted on you like a princess. He was going to erase me like I was nothing. So I made sure he didn't get the chance. My heart pounded, but I didn't flinch. I had her. She stood and whispered one last line. Erase that recording, or you'll regret it, then walked out. But it was too late. I had everything I needed. And now? The courtroom was packed. Family, friends, former business partners, local press. Everyone wanted to see how the Rhodes estate battle would play out, especially now that it wasn't just a will dispute, but a potential murder cover-up. Elaine sat across from me in a navy suit, her expression cold and unreadable. But I noticed the small tremor in her hands. She knew. This wasn't going her way. My attorney presented everything. The digitally signed, notarized will, the witness statement from Marta, the security footage from the notary's office, the journal entries, the voice recording, and finally, Elaine's own recorded confession from our coffee meeting. The judge was silent for a long time after it played, then turned to Elaine's lawyer. Do you have a response? Her attorney stammered. Your Honor, we request a continuance to review. Denied, the judge said sharply. You had time. Elaine stood furious. This is a setup. That recording could have been edited. I stood too. Then why haven't you denied what you said? The judge banged the gavel. "Ms. Rhodes, please sit. Ms. Elaine Rhodes, you are hereby removed as executor of the estate pending further investigation." The court recognizes the newly submitted notarized will as valid and legally binding. I exhaled for the first time in weeks, but it wasn't over yet. After the ruling, police reopened my father's case. The recording alone wasn't enough for criminal charges. Not yet. But with Marta's testimony and the timeline of events, Elaine was now the primary suspect in what was no longer being called an accidental death. She was ordered not to leave the state. And for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. The estate was officially transferred to me. The house, the business, the cars, everything. But it didn't feel like winning. Not really. Because my father was still gone, and no court ruling could bring him back. I kept his study just the way he left it, framed his journal cover and placed it on the shelf, set his favorite pen on the desk beside the family photo we took when I was 5, back when it was just the two of us. The day I walked into his office as the legal owner of everything he'd built, I sat in his chair, opened the bottom drawer, and found one more envelope, unmarked, hidden behind old files. Inside was a single letter. "Leah, if you find this, then you've done more than I ever could to protect what matters. I didn't raise you to be afraid. I raised you to fight when it counts. If I'm gone, I want you to know I was proud of everything you are. And never forget, you are stronger than you know. Love always, Dad." I broke, ugly sobbing, hands over my face, grief finally letting itself out. But when I wiped my tears, something shifted. I wasn't just his daughter anymore. I was his legacy, and I was done letting people like Elaine rewrite the truth. Months later, Elaine was indicted for fraud, will suppression, and obstruction. The investigation into my father's death remains ongoing, but justice moves slowly, and I've learned to be patient. I've taken over the family company, renamed it Rhodes Legacy Group. We fund scholarships for women studying law, finance, and forensic science, because I want more daughters like me to have the tools to fight back. And as for Elaine, she tried to reach out once, a letter begging me to remember the good times. I shredded it without reading past the first line. Some people aren't owed redemption. This wasn't the life I planned. But it's the one I was meant to fight for. And now, I'm not just surviving it. I'm owning it. For Dad, for me, for every woman who's ever been told to sit down and stay quiet. Because when they tried to erase me, they underestimated the daughter my father raised.